Hello, welcome this week to Mark's Mouthpiece, and my guest this week is my good friend Manny Laureano, principal trumpet of the Minnesota Orchestra. Manny, great to see you.
It's great to see you, and my goodness, Mark, you are a thing. I mean, how many
Well,
interviews have you done already? Like 64, 55?
I think this is 38.
38. Okay.
38,
Okay.
and I should mention, by the way, before we get going, that I'd like to thank my sponsors this week, Dylan Music. So if you go to dylanmusic.com
Really don't.
and then give them the code Doolin5, you'll get a 5% discount. And
Oh, I used to listen to those guys all the time. Doolin 5, they were wonderful.
they were I think that was in the early 70s. So
Better than the Beatles, I'm telling you.
that's right. They had 5, not 4, and then. And also Euclid IQ, who is the world's leader in audio and video compression. So thank both of those companies for sponsoring us. So Manny, it's great to see you. I know people are wondering, why are we wearing the Irish Lion t-shirts? And it's because the last time I saw you, I think, in person, we were both in Bloomington. I think I was there to see John Romlin. You were in town conducting and
That's
giving
right.
a master class. And then we went to the Irish Lion, which is a great Irish pub in Bloomington, Indiana. And we got these matching t-shirts.
Yes, absolutely. No, I am forever grateful for this thing. First of all, it's warm. And in this particular climate, that counts for something. So
Wow.
that's a lake out there, and it's all frozen over, and it just snowed yesterday, so it actually looks very, very
Wow. It's not like that
well,
here in
anyway,
Atlanta.
man, it really is. Aside from this, I mean, it's not like there's anybody really listening to this thing, so it's just kind of
Oh,
our
there,
time to get together and chat, right?
there are just 20 people watching right now, but there'll be more later. No, there'll be more, trust me. I don't know how
Yeah,
Facebook adds this up, but it's always way more than that if it says 20.
cool,
Um,
excellent.
but yeah, but you and we met in Jacksonville in 1999 or 2000, I think.
Yeah, we were on tour. We were on tour there, and I'm trying to remember. No, you didn't play a concert the night before. I think it was just it was just a hit and run. We came in, and we had a little time in the afternoon, and you very nicely reached out and just said, "I'm Mark Doolin, and I'm in the section. Love to get together and just hang for a little bit." And that's what we did.
We hung the whole day, and we went to
Yeah.
Jacksonville Beach, as I just reminded you a minute ago, and we got down to the beach, and you very kindly asked me, "Is this where they recruit for Jerry Springer?"
There
And I
was that
think
vibe about it.
it definitely was, as a good friend of mine would say, whiskey tango time down there. It was very, it was very. And then we went back into the hall and we played duets, and then you knocked out Shostakovich 5 that night like it was a Getchell study.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, I remember that now. I'd forgotten that after that we went and we played some duets and stuff. Oh God. And that was with Aji conducting then.
It was. It was. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. Yeah. The orchestra, I remember, just sounded terrific, and the section sounded great, and you guys were just crushing it. It was really exciting, and everybody was
Cool.
so nice. And one of my good colleagues, and I hope my dog doesn't get too excited in the next room. Apologize if he's kind of loud. But one of my colleagues there, Chris Banks, went to go play extra with you guys, and
Yes.
he was our bass trombone player at the time.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
but he had gone, I think, up to play a concert, and he had left his socks, and he came back and told me the story. He said, "And Manny just got me socks." It was like he had left them, and you were kind of like his angel with, you know, sock hosiery or something ready for them.
Well,
So,
it's I guess when we're breaking in, that's the kind of stuff we wind up forgetting, isn't it?
that's right.
I mean, I can get into this later, but I remember my rookie year. Oh my God, it truly was a rookie year. I just because I was quite young when I broke in, but we'll get to that, I guess.
And not that anybody cares about my stories, but this is kind of a funny story, I think. So I remember playing a 1 year in Charlotte, and I forgot the wrong bow tie because they had like an emerald green and a black bow tie. So there was somebody in the orchestra that had a nickname of Bucky. Now I know he's not watching, so it doesn't matter. But what? So I asked one of the horn players. I said, "Do you have a bow tie?" He goes, "No, I think this guy over here does." I said, "You mean Bucky?" I was like, "Bucky, Bucky." He's like, "Who are you calling Bucky? That's Paul." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that wasn't what everybody called him to his face." So, and I was like, "Oh, I'm glad I knew that
Yeah.
before I went right up to the associate concertmaster's face and said, 'Hey, Bucky.'" So,
Way to
so
win friends and influence people.
I know. I had no idea. So, can you talk a little bit about how you started to play the trumpet, how you came into music?
I grew up in New York City, and I grew up in the projects in East Harlem, El Barrio, and I wound up going to the junior high school that was kind of out of what I guess you would call my district. I should have been going to one that was on 106th Street, but they sent me downtown to a place called Wagner Junior High School, named after one of the mayors. And that school had the distinction of having music as a major subject. Now, I hope people can wrap their brains around this. Actually, probably all of the Altercockers that are listening will probably say, "Yeah, I remember those sorts of days." But we had music 7 periods a week. So it was 3 regular periods and 2 double periods. Can you imagine such a thing
No.
today? No, I mean, it was just the priorities. They had the core subjects, the math, the social studies, English, all that stuff. Uh, and boom, they made sure that music was what an opportunity that you had in certain classes, in some of the I guess they gave it more to the intellectually gifted kids, and I somehow wound up in that crew. Don't ask me how. And I wound up uh, given choices, 3 choices. This is like, and I wrote down trumpet, sax, and clarinet. And they had enough trumpets, so they gave me a trumpet. God was having, God has a sense of humor, so he said that I could have a trumpet. So my what they asked of us once they made the choices and assigned us instruments was that we would purchase a mouthpiece, because we wouldn't be playing in instruments for a week. So I wound up with this Artcraft 7C mouthpiece. Now, when I had the mouthpiece in my hand, all which cost me $2.50 back in 1967, I remembered that a group from Lincoln Center, like one of these Juilliard groups, brass quintet, came to my elementary school. And there was a guy that gave a demonstration on the trumpet. All the instruments were demonstrated. And I remembered very clearly him talking about the mouthpiece and how the lips buzz. And then he buzzed on the mouthpiece, and then he added the horn. And that was very cool to watch that little process. So when I got the mouthpiece and I got home, I remembered that very distinctly. In case anybody should think that there's no value to the idea of sending college students out to schools to expose kids to music, I'm here to tell you that I'm here talking to you, Mark, because of that. Because I remember grabbing that mouthpiece, putting it up to my lips, and trying to make a buzzing sound. And again, I was able to make some sort of a semi-decent sound. Now you have to remember that this was back in the days. I said it was 1967, right? So who was around then? Al Hirt was playing the theme from the Green Hornet. Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. All of the movies that were being shown, there were all these gigantic orchestrations, lots of brass. I grew up in East Harlem, which means that we listened to Spanish language radio, and there was always a lot of Latin music playing. So the point is that the trumpet was kind of in my ear. It was everywhere we went. It's not, so much like today where a lot of the music is just based on rhythm and maybe more about the vocalist and a lot of synthesized stuff or whatever. I mean, it was all clear and present brass. So I had that sound in my ear, and I also have always had a fairly active imagination. And I started trying to play tunes, whatever I could think of. And that was okay, but not enough. So I went to my mom's junk drawer, and I grabbed a straw, and I put a straw inside the end of the mouthpiece, the stem of the mouthpiece. And that kind of made it sound more trumpety. I didn't realize that I was now limiting the overtone series and all that stuff, but didn't know anything about that, didn't care. I just knew it sounded warmer and kind of cool. And then after a little bit of that, I went and got a funnel, one of these little plastic funnels, and I scotch taped that to the end of the straw. So for a week, I had this little makeshift trumpet that I was blowing around with, not realizing that what I was doing was strengthening this, my face kind of in its most nascent sort of stage. I was doing all of this buzzing. And by the way, sidebar, I have a student who I began this last September. I have decided I absolutely love teaching beginners. I think I like teaching them more than the older students. It's a lot of fun. So I got this girl that I'm teaching to do that whole thing. I told her, I said, go get a straw, go get a funnel, and I want you to do this, because she wasn't going to play trumpet. She was going on vacation. I said, take the mouthpiece and all this whole Michigatz and just play any tunes you can, anything as much as you can. She came back and she had a nice sound. So I don't know. I think this works. This whole idea of the mouthpiece before the instrument, if the kid has any ear at all, because I audition the youngest students. I want to see if they have any real aptitude for, if they've got an ear. I sit and I play things on the piano. I do rhythms and all that kind of stuff, just to see if they have some kind of aptitude. So anyway, back to what was going on with me when I came to the brass class, because by the way, this was wonderful. I didn't go right into band. You didn't do that in 7th grade at Wagner Junior High School in 1967. What they did was we had brass class for the majority of the year. So it was all the brass kids. And then towards the very end, for about a month, then we played the entire beginning band together. We played, I think it was from the Easy Steps band method or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember that in this brass class, it was almost like from a movie. In the middle of this cacophony of just craziness, people grabbing all their instruments for the very first time, I picked up the trumpet and I played a note, whatever it was. And it was like the teacher who was dealing with all this stuff suddenly just kind of went, and he looked at me. And I remember at first I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, but I remember him looking at me kind of like going, wow, this kid has an actual sound. He's not just blowing a bunch of nonsense through his horn. And at the end of that first year, these little, I sound like Forrest Gump. It's funny what a young man remembers, And I remember before that concert, that spring concert, that Mr. Press, what's his first name? Joel Press, who I believe, if he's still with us, lives in Massachusetts somewhere. Mr. Press came up to me and said, Manny, I want you to stand out tonight. I want to make sure you really stand out. And I thought that was so cool, that he liked something about what I was doing, all that. So that was my first year, was just all band method stuff. I didn't
Yeah.
have a private teacher. And the next year, I got to audition for something called the Manhattan Borough-wide Band and Orchestra Program.
Right.
And essentially, the kids in the borough of Manhattan and Queens and Staten Island, Brooklyn, and the Bronx all had their little bands of select kids, and I auditioned for that and got in. Worked with a wonderful guy named David Rosenthal, and I want you to remember that name because it's going to come up in a little bit. And the guy basically changed my life. He's the other reason that I'm sitting here talking to you, Mark. So we played a bunch of transcriptions. One of them being a very cool piece by Wallingford Rieger named called Dance Rhythms. Another one was it was a transcription of the New World Symphony first movement. But the funniest part about all of this is that when I auditioned, they placed me in the orchestra. And I said, oh, okay. And I had zero experience with strings.
Right.
And sat down, and what to me seemed like the most horrific set of sounds that I ever heard were happening right in front of me. And I just said, this is awful. I don't like this. I want to be in a band. I don't want to be in this thing.
Yeah.
And I went up to the conductor of the orchestra, a black gentleman named Camille C. Taylor. And I said, Mr. Taylor, may I speak with you? And he said, yes, what's going on? And I said, sir, I just don't think I'm orchestra material. I really would rather play in the band. And I can, again, the things a young man remembers, I remember him literally being taken aback, going like this. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yes, sir. I think I'd much rather play in the band. Than he goes, okay, well, we'll make arrangements to get someone up. And he put me in the band. Fast forward a year, I've enjoyed the band. I've enjoyed what's going on at school. Great. We get to the concert. The band has already played. Great. To this point, I haven't heard the orchestra because it's just been rehearsing with the band. They start playing. I can remember they played Pavan by Morton Gould. They played the Wagner introduction to Act 3 for Lohengrin, all arrangements, of course,
Yeah.
and then a gorgeous, that wonderful Lucien Caillé arrangement of the Little Fugue in G minor. And I listened to now the year-long work culminating in this concert, and I sat back and I literally just said, schmuck, what did you do? You could have been doing this. So at that point, I learned I was orchestra material. And I mentioned the gentleman named David Rosenthal.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dave Rosenthal was the conductor of the band. And at the end of the year, at the end of the season, they had this little ceremony, kind of, just after the concert, there were another rehearsal or two just for fun, just to read. And he says, I want to make an announcement. I'm awarding a scholarship to two people in the program. One was to a flute player named Josephine Pereira. And he said, and then the second scholarship is going to go to Manny Laureano on trumpet. And I didn't even know what the word scholarship meant. I had no idea. And I've come to find out that I would be taking private lessons. I went, Oh, that sounds cool, because I has now gotten my scope of friends had widened,
Hmm.
and I started understanding that people took private lessons, to get better on their instruments. And now I was going to be one of those people, thanks to the city of New York and this scholarship program through the public schools. And I wound up the next fall going to the 92nd Street YMHA and studying with a gentleman named Jimmy Smith, who happened to be fourth trumpet with the New York Philharmonic. And I remember my first lesson. All I did that whole year, that entire year, all I did was just bring him stuff from school. And he helped me get better at those things. This, in his mind, this was probably just going to be a one-off. Okay, so, we'll give a scholarship to this kid and all this stuff. And then after a year, he'll be on his way or whatever. But come to find out, I could actually play. And so Jimmy took a real interest in me. And at my very last lesson, no, excuse me, at my very first lesson of that year, I told him that we were going to play this Pavane by Morton Gould. The band transcription, I pushed for it because I liked it so much from what I'd heard of Burlwide. And he said, "Oh, hey, go ahead, why don't you play it?" And then he knew the piece, of course, and he got out a little Besson cornet that he had, and he started going, boom, 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 boom. And I had never heard a trumpet played in that middle and low register, these G's popping out like a little trombone. And I literally just kind of sat there with my eyes turning into saucers. And he kind of stopped and went, "Aren't you going to play?" And I'm, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I started playing along with him. And that was the first time that I heard a real bona fide trumpet sound. I mean, live right in front of me, not students and not teachers who were actually oboe players picking up the trumpet, to demonstrate, badly. So God bless them. I mean, they're doing the best they can. But I'm sidebar number 2 here. Anybody who's listening right now who is interested in an ed degree, going to school and becoming a teacher, being a band teacher, I give the following advice. If you wish to demonstrate on your home instrument. Don't be a trumpet player and try and demonstrate an oboe and vice versa. Because one of the things that Mr. Press did, gentleman from the first year, was whenever he demonstrated, he always got out his clarinet. And when he played it with a beautiful sound. So the hearing a beautiful sound playing the notes that I needed to hear was of much more value than hearing him play a secondary, tertiary instrument. So I will say that, and I can't possibly make that point greater than this. Always demonstrate on your home instrument if you're going to. So I had a wonderful year with Jimmy Smith. And at the end of that year, or in March or so, it was time to start thinking about high school. And I heard about this wonderful place called the High School of Music and Art. And you go and you play in orchestra and band and all kinds of things, and you learn music. And I said, this would be a really cool thing to go. So I auditioned for it and played my instrument. There was I went to another room and somebody said, "Sing back these notes." Okay, play this rhythm back, all this stuff. And I remember being able to do all of that and got into the school. And I spent the next 3 years at the High School of Music and Art and studying with Jimmy Smith at the time. Now, going back to the Y now, I mentioned that it was the 92nd Street YMHA. H stands for Hebrew. It wasn't the YMCA, it was the YMHA. So this wonderful woman named Hadassah Markson was the what do you call it? She was the head of the music school. And she calls me in, and she had a very high voice, very sweet, very high voice. And she says to me, Manny, we have to talk to you about something. And I said, yes, Mrs. Barksey, what can I do? She says, well, we want you to come back and study here at the 92nd Street Y. And I was really happy. That's great. She said, there's one little problem, though. You're on scholarship, and the scholarship is meant for Jewish children. And I said, oh, okay. And I hear, young Catholic boy from East Harlem.
Right.
So what I want you to know is what we're going to do is we're going to change your name on the application. And here at the school, you're going to be Emmanuel Levy. So I was Emmanuel Levy officially at the 92nd Street Y, where I proceeded to spend 3 wonderful years studying with Jimmy and getting my first Arbin book, which I still own.
Wow.
And him getting me on the track to audition for Juilliard, Manhattan, and Queens College.
Now, did he play, Manny? Did he play a lot in those lessons, or was it just that first time you heard him?
Not really. Interesting thing. I think that the days that I had my lessons, which were Tuesdays, I have a feeling those were probably concert nights at the Philharmonic. Maybe they were filling in from the week before, whatever it was. Right. And so, he never really played much, but he did occasionally play. And I would live for those moments when he would get out his beautiful silver basson and play with just this wonderful, crisp, clear sound, and with just like the most beautiful vibrato. So I got the opportunity to really listen to the kind of expression. Also, something else was happening at the same time, and that was that Juan Rodriguez, who lived in apartment 7D, used to work in the subway station at one of these little kiosks where they sold records and all kinds of little tchotchkes, And so one day he comes in with a recording, and there's it's got a beautiful cover on it, kind of looking very regal. It says "The Magnificent Sound of Rafael Mendes," and he said, "Manny, you got to listen to this guy play. Very, very good." I said, "Oh, this is great." So I thanked him and put it on, and it was the album that starts with, the majestic sound of Rafael Mendes. It's the one that starts with the bell song from Lakme, and I listened to this rich, gorgeous sound, and once again, just kind of was put on my heels listening to it, never really experiencing on that conscious a level of what a trumpet could sound like, and then listening to all these fantastic pyrotechnics that he could do. It was a whole nother level of listening. And so those years at the High School of Music and Art were years where I did a lot of listening to what was going on around me. I listened to people talking about the 2 Chicagos. The first Chicago was the one where Lee Loughnane played first trumpet, right? the only trumpet. Yep. And so that's where I got to listen. So we started getting into horn bands and Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Chase and all that stuff. And the other Chicago was the one with our esteemed Chicago Symphony and Bud Herseth and company. And, all of this new stuff being thrown. And this is the value of these specialized schools. And my understanding is that there was talk about getting rid of them in New York City, which is a horrible idea. So I hope that becomes something that just becomes
nothing.
A little history that just goes over the transom without really any kind of an action. But the idea of a guy like me, a teenager who was socially awkward, I had glasses, I was skinny, I had terminal acne, just as awkward and as nerdy as a lot of kids can be. Being able to be surrounded by a bunch of other social misfits, but who happen to like music,
Yeah.
and start listening to the various things that people are exposed to. I'll never forget the very first time that I heard the band Chase. This guy who played trumpet in one of the bands, and we got to be friends, calls me up on the phone, and he says, Manny, you gotta listen to this. And he played me the first cut from their first album, Open Up Wide, and I was convinced that he had the record on 45 instead of 33. And I said, that's impossible. Nobody can do that. And well, limited experience, right? So it was there that at Music and Art, and then also being in the auditioning for, as I said, there was the All Borough Orchestra. There was also the All City Orchestra. So I auditioned that, got in, more exposure to wonderful things. I was in there for 3 years, and my interest in auditioning for a place like Juilliard, that's where it all sprang. Mr. Smith went ahead and pushed me. I had been lent a piccolo trumpet by one of the faculty members, a gentleman named Jack Laumer. And he lent it to me because somebody wanted to program the second Brandenburg. So I said, here, you need to play this. And I went, oh, okay. He said, yeah, but you're going to need a piccolo trumpet. And so Mr. Laumer got me everything that I needed, and I learned to play most of it. The part that I couldn't play was the part with the high A's.
Yeah.
Now, here's that story. So Jimmy Smith gets me ready to audition at Juilliard. And what am I going to play? I'm going to play the last movement of the Brandenburg, and Vasily Brandt's Study, and a few excerpts. I think Capriccio Espagnol and William Tell or something like that.
Yeah.
So I walk into Juilliard, and here is Ed Troidel, Dinny Diantinis, Mr. Vacchiano, Jimmy Chambers, and I didn't realize exactly who I was playing for, but except with the exception of Mr. Vacchiano, that's the only,
Right.
So I play through most of the third movement of the Brandenburg, and I get ready to get the others. And so Vacchiano says, oh, wait a minute, play some from the first movement. And I said, oh, well, where do you want me to start, sir? And he says, hey, play the part with the high A's. And I'm going, oh, God. So I said, okay, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. So as well go. So yeah, and I got all three. And cool. That was a nice time for that to happen.
Yeah.
All right, great. So Vacchiano says, yeah, that A is sharp. So why don't you play that with a second valve? And I went, okay. So I took another run at it and nailed all three of the A's again. And then so he says to me, he says, yeah, see, the pitch is better, isn't it? I should have said yes. But of course, what I said was, actually, sir, it sounded a little bit low to me. And he says, yeah, play it again, 1 and 2. So I had to take another run. So I wound up playing a note I'd never played before 9 times in that. So
Wow.
that I guess impressed them, and they had placed me in some higher orchestras, but when I got there and did an extra audition, it was clear that I was way too green. I didn't know enough. Being able to play the Brandenburg and all that stuff, well, that's just chops. That wasn't this stuff. That you're not going to put me in an orchestra where I barely know how to transpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had the goods, but I didn't have the kind of experience.
Did you play but did you perform that Brandenburg in high school?
Yes. Yeah, we had a performance there. Well, listen, man, that was the High School of Music and Art. That's why it was such a magical place. For people that don't know what I'm talking about, that's the school from Fame. Well,
Yeah.
it sort of is, because really the school in Fame that they portray is the high school performing arts, which was our annex. It's like a mini Juilliard, dance, drama, and music. And ours was strictly music and visual arts.
If there's anybody out there that's like in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, Fame was a TV show.
Yeah, and before that, a movie. Before that,
and that's right, and a movie. And Irene Cara sung the theme song. What? But going back to Jimmy Smith, because he was also a student of Max Schlossberg.
That's right.
And so did he ever, number one, talk about Schlossberg, or did he write exercises out like Schlossberg would do?
Nope. Lessons with Jimmy Smith were really interesting, formative to me. I mean, with him, it was really only two books. It was the Arbin and the Brandt. And the Brandt came in because of Juilliard. So it was the Brandt, and then if I had a little solo I was playing, if I was going to play Bugles Holiday somewhere or something like that, he always welcomed the opportunity to do that. So it was kind of loose that way. He didn't really, he didn't say, okay, this is going to be the hardcore method. He really, this is why I love Jimmy so much. And I have to remember the lesson of studying with him as a young man, that he let me kind of define who I was, for better or worse. He was not real, he was strict. He wanted me to practice, but he was not one of these, he didn't rule with the iron fist. He was a sweet, he was grandpa. He was everybody's nice grandpa. So I really loved Jimmy, and he, gosh, I would stay in touch with him, and unfortunately he passed away from Alzheimer's, and I got, the last time that I saw him, I could see that it had already started kind of taking effects just by some of the things that I could hear him talking about, and it was my first experience with anybody with that dreaded condition. So, but he died a couple of years later, and I will thank him for many, many, many things in my memory. After that, I got to tell you, Mark, I have been blessed with studying with some absolutely fantastic people, all of the ones that I needed when I needed them. That summer between music and art and Juilliard, I had my first experience at a summer camp called Eastern Music Festival in North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina. And there I studied with Rob Roy McGregor, who was at that point still in Baltimore. He was the assistant principal in Baltimore to Don Tyson.
Right.
And he was a very different guy. He was younger, kind of just a little hipper, a little philosophical bent to him. Did a much more playing, because they required their faculty to do more recital playing and all that. So it was the first time that I got to study with somebody that I actually got to see them in process of practicing for stuff and performing on a weekly basis. And that was huge. That was huge, to be able to see that sort of thing. And Rob got me listening and hip to just some of the physical aspects, some things about breathing and all that, just things that I'd never even really considered, because I was a fairly natural talent with all that stuff, and just didn't know about certain things. Embouchures, no problem there. Mouthpieces, I was pretty much just very, very faithful to the mouthpieces that I had been playing.
What mouthpiece was that? What back to, I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but so you start on the 7C, and then you're playing with all these different teachers. What did you progress to? What was your setup in high school then?
So in high school, after my first year with, I know, actually, really after my first few months with Jimmy, he got me on a Bach 2.5, and went from the 7C, and all of a sudden my upper register went like this, but it progressed right back up very rapidly. You know, within a couple of months, I was back on track, and then proceeding more. Except I loved the sound, and I realized, wow, you know, with bigger mouthpieces, you get a nice sound like that. And I stayed on that for quite a while. And when I got to Juilliard, you know, everybody says, "Yeah, you're studying Vacchiano, you know, he's gonna change your mouthpiece," all that stuff. Never touched it. Never touched it. He seemed to like what I was doing, and he had wisdom enough to just say, "Kid's okay. I'm not gonna do anything." I had a few mouthpiece changes that I made completely on my own.
Yeah.
And they never affected the upper register except in a positive sort of way. They never affected the sound other than in a positive way. So, you know, that I didn't have the experience that a lot of guys did, because for whatever reason I just didn't have the issues that Vacchiano might have been, you know, trying to fix with them. So I didn't really go through that. So I went from that to like I saw that the big guys were playing 1Cs and things like that, and the John Pettinato, known as Pepe back in those days, who used to work for Bach, he had a bunch of mouthpieces, and Vacchiano had actually, to tell you the honest truth, I would kind of look at whatever it was that he was playing, and I said, huh, he's playing one of those. Okay, I'm gonna go get a mouthpiece like that. Not realizing it doesn't quite work that way, but nonetheless, it did get me exposed. So by the time I left Juilliard and was playing, I think I was probably on a 1.25 C. I think I was on a 1.25 C by that point. Yeah. So my, you know, I have to, full confession here, you know, my first year didn't really go that well at the school, and a lot of it was just chalking it up to being very naive about the way the world works and about what the world expects of you. In fact, I'm going to tell you guys something that very few people know, and that is that I was such a scrub in my first year. I had been given this lovely scholarship, and I lost it because I was kind of a disappointment in terms of producing what they thought I was going to be producing. And that was a huge wake-up call, because now I had the privilege of paying for my own college tuition. My dad had to take out a loan, which when I graduated, he promptly presented me, "Here, buddy, this is yours now." You know, a story that people have told me, the people that I have told people, was of a particular lesson, and it was in April. That I remember very well. And I was just screwing up left and right. The transposition wasn't right. I just had one of these mammothly bad lessons. We all have that lesson.
Yep.
And Vacchiano just kind of looked down at the floor, and then he looked at me and says, "You know, Laureano, you're no better now than you were when you walked in that door." And I wanted to crawl in the deepest abyss that I could find and just die, because my hero had just basically told me that I wasn't producing. So I went downstairs to the cafeteria, and I was at a cup of coffee or something, and I was looking out the window, and I was just, you know, ruminating on what Vacchiano had just told me. And dear colleague Scott Wharton, who I've been looking for years, because I want to thank him. Honestly, I actually have been looking for him because I want to thank him. So maybe this will get to him somewhere. But Scott said, "What's the matter with you? You look like you lost your wallet or something." I said, "No, no, worse." I said, and yeah, I told him what happened, and he said, "Yep, we've all had that lesson," because he was a few years older. So
Yeah.
we've all had that lesson. They said, "Now, the way I see it, you can either sit here and cry about it, or you can get your butt into a practice room and do what the man's telling you to do." And I looked at Scott and I said, "Yeah." And I went, grabbed my case, found Ruts, and practiced. That whole week, I practiced like I'd never practiced before. Then I came in, and Vacchiano, I remember him saying on whatever the second etude was, he says, "Hey, there you go. That's the way to do it." You know, by that time, I'd already lost the scholarship, but he says, just getting that little bit of affirmation from him, and that turned the corner for me. So, this thing of adversity, it's not about how you get knocked down, but how you get up after. I think that's in the Rocky Balboa movie or something like
Yeah.
that, or the Creed
All
movie. I forget which one it is.
all 17 of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's about how you get up. Well, you know that I study martial arts, and the master of the school and I have lots of really cool conversations, just philosophically, about fighting and all this stuff. And he says, there are warriors and there are worms. And he said, and it's all a question of how you react to getting knocked down. So that was an important lesson for me.
Yeah.
And it's something that I refer to, because we all have those days that don't go so. Look, yesterday, things just weren't going right. I said, what the hell? Just not at the standard that I wanted. And I went back in today, and I said, okay, I'm going to organize this just a little bit differently, headed towards this, and boom,
Right.
I got the result that I wanted. These things, I don't think that we can appreciate it, Mark, until we go through it, right?
Absolutely. Oh, well, absolutely. I mean,
You can't teach.
and I think that I think you can teach it. And aren't you glad that it happened to you in your first year of school? Because then you can learn from it later on. When you
Right.
need to pick yourself up, you can always go back to that you've done it before.
Right. Precisely. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was an important 4 years. I got to meet Jerry Schwartz
Mm-hmm.
at that time. A lot of people that I got to start doing freelance gigs. I was corresponding recently with Louis Ranger. Louis Ranger was he was playing with American Brass Quintet, and he was also, of course, freelancing. And my very first freelance gig, I get this call to play this gig, and it's for a job at the convention center downtown near Columbus Center
Mm-hmm.
and Columbus Circle, and it was going to be conducted by Arthur Fiedler, and the American Symphony Orchestra was going to be playing, and I was going to be playing fourth trumpet on this.
Mm-hmm.
But when I heard that it was Fiedler conducting, my heart went through my stomach. Why? Because I grew up watching Saturday night at the Pops, right? The Boston Pops. Saturday night, I would watch that, and to my inexperienced eye, all the stuff Fiedler was doing was complete mystery to me. I had no idea what any of this stuff that he was doing was. And so I was scared out of my mind that I wasn't going to be able to follow him, and I was going to mess this up, and I might as well just start thinking about another career now.
Yeah.
But I sat down. Louis sounded amazing. He sounded absolutely amazing. Beautiful player. And when Fiedler got up there, everything made sense relative to what was in front of me. And it was like, okay, I see what he's doing. It's all right. I got to play later on with Ray Crisara.
Mm-hmm.
God, we talk about a gorgeous trumpet sound, beautiful technique and warmth. It was like Jimmy. He was he was of that school. It sounded a lot like Jimmy Smith to me,
Yeah.
just that beautiful, warm sound. I got to play some gigs with Jerry and Mark Gould, Alan Dean, the New York Trumpet Ensemble stuff. So my career had a very, very nice path
Yeah.
that was starting to take, and I started taking auditions too in my I think it was my senior year where I wound up taking 3 auditions for Dallas Symphony second trumpet, um, New York Philharmonic second trumpet, and then Metropolitan Opera. And I took those 3 auditions, and Dallas wasn't a disaster, but it was clear that I didn't know a lot of stuff. The Ravel Piano Concerto was on there, and I had the excerpt, but this I'd never seen this part before, so I was basically reading. That was, if you can imagine. I do remember one thing about the Dallas audition. You know how all the auditions, well, back in the old days, they had proctors
Right.
sit down and play this. So the first thing that I had to play was the second movement of the Haydn. And the guy spoke to me very quietly behind the screen. And I played through the second movement of the Haydn, and I played it very well. And the guy said, "Oh man, that was beautiful. And you're from New York, huh?" You're damn real. I'm from New York. You know? Okay, so I just shook that off and just went. The next audition for second was with the Philharmonic, and again, I was too green.
Yeah.
I could play the excerpt, but I was just playing them wrong.
Is that when
You know?
Penzarella won the gig?
No. Whoa, wait a minute. I think you're right. Yes,
Yeah.
that's when Carmine left and Penzarella got the job. So I don't feel so bad.
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
legends in the business, right?
Right.
So and then when I auditioned for, and then my next audition was for the Met because Penzarella left to go to the Philharmonic, and I did very well on that audition, and I got into the finals. It was the first time that I'd actually gotten into the finals. I was in a group of 10, I think, and and did well, but didn't get the job. So I called up Vacchiano that night, and I said, I'm doing these auditions, and I'm getting closer, but I'm just not getting the gigs. So he said to me in his wonderful Godfather voice, he says, don't worry about it. That just means you're not cut out to be a second trumpet. You'll be a first trumpet one day. A few months later, after having played the summer with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I became first trumpet of the Seattle Symphony.
Oh my God. Well, that's 3 auditions and then a gig. That's not bad.
I'm
not bad.
Not complaining. And this was like, and I got the Seattle job basically out of school.
Yeah.
Because I played with what do you call it, with Emerson, Lake and Palmer for that weekend, and met 3 wonderful players. David Lord from the UK was a freelancer there, and the guy, hot trumpet player. He did a lot of the kind of the more jazzy part of the book. I played the lead on the more classical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Susan Anger, who I found, who's from Minnesota, a classy Chickowitz student, and kind of exemplified. I remember I was in school with Eddie Carroll, and she had that same sort of approach, that wonderful, clean sound, beautiful quality to it. And my dear friend Bob Caron, who is now out in LA, I believe he's teaching out there. And oh God, what a great section we were. We had so much fun. I mean, I'm all of 21 years old and I'm on the road with a rock band. Excuse me.
That's a good time. There's some video of that too on YouTube of you guys playing also Sprach, I believe, right? Is that what it is?
No. What?
With Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
No, not also Sprach. It was the piece that. There were several things that we did from the classical repertoire. Enemy God from Scythian Suite, and we played a bunch of Copland. We played
That was it.
The fan, because it's ba ba ba. Yeah,
That's right. There's a Copeland. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we're playing that, and I gotta tell you, that was an incredible rush after playing the show and then doing the encore, and you'd hear the drums, and the audience would start going out of their minds. The matches would come on, and the spotlights would hit us, and the audience was just going out of their minds. It was a wonderful, wonderful way to spend the earliest part of my 20s. And I got the Seattle job. I remember that was an all-day process. It started, I showed up like 9 o'clock in the morning, didn't get to play till 4:30. Then my final, I was up to play it was 10:30 at night when I got to play. It's 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
And at midnight, Maury Simon, the personnel manager, came out and said, he opens the door, goes, Laureano. Not like, could everyone please come in and thank you very much. It's just, Laureano, all right, you got the job. Congratulations.
He was ready to go home.
You know, one thing about that, the music director at the time, Mark, was a guy named Rainer Miedel. And the assistant was a fellow named Henry Holt. Henry Holt was big opera conductor, but he was also the assistant there and did a lot of the kids concerts and that kind of resident conductor sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Henry came to conduct Salome here in town, and I had him over to the house, and he started talking about that audition in Seattle, and he says, you know, Rainer was ambivalent about you because you were so young. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, he really wasn't quite sure. He says, but I said to him, he said, let's take this kid. And he said, I know he's young, but he's got something. There's something special about what he does. And I think we would be wise to grab him now while we can.
Right.
And so Rainer, you know, Rainer spoke German. It was an East German, and Henry spoke. I'm sure the conversation was in German. And interestingly, when I was leaving the room, because there wasn't any screen or anything like that.
Right.
I left, and the conductor, he says, you're playing. I can hear a little bit of German style in your playing. And I said, well, I studied with William Vachiano from the Philharmonic, and he was a student of Max Schlossberg, and he really impressed upon us to play, you know, in that style. So I was happy that the guy picked up on it, you know? Yeah. That was kind of cool. So I got the job, worked with two wonderful gentlemen. Jeff Cole was second trumpet, and Rick Presley was the third and assistant principal. And we got along famously. My first motorcycle ride was with Rick. He had this cool motorcycle, and said, "Hey, you ever ride a motorcycle?" I said, "No, man." It's like, "Okay, I got a helmet here. Come on." And took me around on a ride. It was very, very cool. Also had the distinction of having the same birth date as I. But Jeff Cole was the second trumpet, was as I think many young principal players will tell you, and I know that Bud used to talk about this too, about the first second trumpet player that he worked with in Chicago. Those players, the good ones, are really very influential on a young principal's playing and what we do. And Jeff just kind of grabbed me by the collar and just said, "Come on, we're going to sit and we're going to listen to a bunch of stuff." And I have told him many times that he is the guy that really taught me how to listen to music, not just, "Oh, this Bruckner, this is cool, this is all." He would point out certain things that I think put me in good stead later on, in terms of the approach of playing the trumpet in various styles. I mean, we listened a lot to CSO. You have
Right.
to understand that my time at Juilliard was mostly devoted to listening to the Philharmonic recordings, the natural thing. And then once I was out of it, then he got me listening to Herseth and Company, and recognizing what was so extraordinary
Yeah.
about that playing. And that was that heyday, the late 70s. The Chicago Symphony Brass, with that particular crew, were just monsters. So
Well,
it was a great time.
I wanted to go back to just one thing. When you got the Seattle job, do you remember what the phone call was like with Vacchiano?
Yeah. He was my second phone call. The first one was to my fiance, and then actually he was my third phone call, because I called my parents.
Right.
And so, hey, good job. You gotta live out there. It's wet out there. It's like I always go where the weather is. It's either wet or it's cold. One of the two. So I need to get a gig in Hawaii.
Well, and I know some people are going to want to ask, could you talk a little bit, because I know we're going to get into the Chicago School of Things in a little bit and talk about that. Talk a little bit about Vacchiano's rules, because I think we've heard more about that in the past couple of years, since Tom Stevens started talking about it when he was making those videos.
Yeah. So here's what you have to understand. And okay, my horn is sitting here because I was practicing in this room. I have to play this because it'll demonstrate the best. So I've had my lesson with Vacchiano, and there's like, everybody gets the same first lesson basically. This is where he kind of figures out what you're going to do. And so towards the very end, I said to him, I said, may I play for you a solo, something that I've been working on? And he said, well, what is it? This is a Brandt concert piece. And he said, yeah, go ahead and play it. So I swear to God, this is what it sounded like. All right.
Okay.
After playing this mariachi version of this Russian piece, he looked like I had just shot him. And he goes, no! That's as far as I got. Just those first four measures. That's as far as I got. He said, no! And so he started explaining. He says, you can't play with the vibrato like that. And you can't over accent the weak phrase. And I started to get an idea of the rules. And slowly but surely, we, first year guys, myself, Vinny Dedea, and a guy named Jeffrey Venho, the three who had gotten in that year, and studying with Vacchiano, started to learn. First of all, the vibrato, that went bye-bye. Really old school. By the way, for people who are wondering, what? Trumpet without vibrato? Well, what Norrington explained to us, Roger Norrington came and started talking about this, the whole notion of using the vibrato. First of all, in England, certainly, Morris Murphy, okay, he was the exception, and there are a few people that kind of followed his path. But what was it? John Lang, a guy used to play in LSO. The British style of playing was no vibrato. It's just this kind of wonderful, just brass sort of sound. Before Morris came and changed everything up. This was basically the way everybody played, even in America. And I finally understood when Norrington started telling me about all this, because I had to ask him about it, and we talked, and you say, no, this was something that really in the 30s changed. It had been coming gradually, but before the 1930s, the style of playing in orchestra was really without vibrato, more of that Germanic style, that English style. So this was one of the things that Bacchiano just railed about, was the overuse of the vibrato. Now, is that to say that he completely discouraged it? Only with us first and second and third years, the students. By the time you got to your senior year, if you had survived the first three, he kind of let you go ahead and open up and show your personality. Because look at his famous students, Charlie, Monday Guitarra, Tommy Stevens, all those guys play with vibrato, but they don't do it all. They didn't do it all the time. It was a judicious sort of a thing, So he wanted to get us doing that. The rules about intonation. The basic rule about intonation was listen to what's going on. He oversensitized us with alternate fingerings. For example, if a player had a habit of playing sharp, he would take his slide and push it all the way in, and then say, now play into, and just make the player open up and play down into the pitch. And after a couple of weeks, he allowed the guy to pull the slide back out.
Yeah.
When I had a G play, an upper G, he'd make me finger it 1 and 2. So that when I stopped using 1 and 2, an open G, if it was even remotely sharp, and that note is plenty sharp, it would just shake me, and it would make me respond to it. He would make me play my A's second valve. Remember the Brandenburg?
Yeah, right.
The high A's, he'd make me play them second valve. He would do these things to sensitize us. So those are kind of the nuts and bolts. But then when it came to music, he would make us aware of the weak notes in a phrase and the strong notes in the phrase. He would make us aware of how offensive we could make a syncopation sound by over accenting it. He would have us play with grace in our playing by having us think of a little diminuendo on an arpeggio. Now, does that mean that every arpeggio you play is like that? No, but it's all of these rules, all of these things were meant to add weaponry to our arsenal, so that if I was playing with Ray Mace, if I was playing with Jerry Schwartz, if I was playing with Ray Crisara, that I would be able to listen to him and say, okay, I got to go to this. I wouldn't be so stuck in what I was doing,
right,
that I couldn't adjust and go. This is why, and this is a funny thing, this is why I loved playing for second trumpet. I was very I was very sad about not getting the second trumpet notes, because I loved playing second trumpet. I still do. Every once in a while, when Doug Carlson, I usually like to have Doug play the young person's concerts, and if there's something that calls for 4, I'll go sit on the end, because I love filling in the sound of a section from the bottom, and you've got to have a rich, clear, low register for that. So these rules all were designed to make us into musicians, not just trumpet players. This is what was so incredibly important about his contribution. Look, there was a reason why at one point orchestras in America were loaded with Bacchiano students.
Right.
Conductors listened to these guys and said, yeah, this is, I mean, assuming that they, played in the manner in which he taught us. There was a reason that these conductors just went, yeah, no, this is good. I like this. I like this quality, this sound. I like this approach. And then, of course, after that, many fine teachers started to emerge, and certainly Vince and all that, and then been producing his group of students. But the rules basically simply defined were those that made us sound like artists and not just trumpet players.
Yeah. And for people who are a little younger that maybe have not heard Vacchiano, because I know when I was in school, it was pre-internet and things moved a little slower. So we were still hearing recordings that were made 25, 30, 40 years before. I don't know if that's necessarily the case now with students. So, so if you were going to pick out a few recordings that people who have not listened to him the most, what would they be?
Okay. The first one has to be Billy the Kid. Vacchiano's Copeland, that old Copeland album that came out with Bernstein the Philharmonic, I absolutely adore that album.
Is that the one with El Salon Mexico on that?
El Salon Mexico is on there. Billy the Kid is on there. Appalachian Spring. I mean, it really was just some first class sort of playing, and there were enough little solos. And there's this music from the theater that's on there that's also beautiful right. that he plays. When I was at school, there was a listening library. I think it was like on the second or third floor or whatever it was, and we used to go there and kind of go between listening to the Philharmonic, mostly a few recordings with Bud, but the one that I would just go up there to listen to over and over was the Mahler 7 with Vacchiano.
On a D trumpet too, right?
Well, yes, for the most part. I think this was on the D. I think this was on the D. And then there's also this little there's one part, the Auf kleinen Pisten part that where he played on the F trumpet, which, by the way, I bought from him before he died, and I used in the same spot for the recording that we just made. It's a nice recording, by the way. I really like it. This is one of my favorite recordings of the orchestra. But yeah, those two. There are two recordings of Poem of Ecstasy.
Yes.
There was the commercial one that he made with Metropolis that you could buy. Now, there was another one that was made, and I think this is one of these pirated things that got made into a recording. And I was fortunate enough to get that. I think when I got it, it might have come out as a CD actually. I'll have to look and see if I can find that. But that's of a live performance. Absolutely fantastic. It's, in my opinion, it's better even than the
Metropolis recording.
Well, Metropolis conducted both.
Right, but the
I have a feeling.
release.
Yeah. So I think it was just one of those performances that probably happened around the time that they were recording it.
Right.
And it's got that great live feeling to it. It is absolutely stellar. Goodness. So many. Well, the Mahler 2 with Bernstein, that part after Die Grosse Appel, that where with all these beautiful that, and also the scherzo, you just sit there and melt. But the granddaddy of all of them is last movement of Mahler 3, the chorale. I was still music director of the Minnesota Youth Symphony when Mr. Vacchiano died, and I had just been on a trip to New York, and I kept trying to see him, but I think he was too sick to see anybody. But I kept calling him, just kind of to see if I could drop by or just kind of to say hi.
Yeah.
And he thanked me for calling him and all that, but he just wasn't able to see it. And I remember that last phone call, the last thing he told me was he loved me.
Yeah.
And that was, I didn't realize that in 2 weeks he would be gone. So when he died, I wanted to make sure that the kids that I was conducting had a sense of who he was. Because I had spoken to him a little bit, and I said, look, so my teacher from Juilliard passed away recently, and I really think I need to just show you how special this guy was.
Yeah.
So I got some playing device and played from the chorale for them.
Yeah.
And as he started to play in that wonderful expressive style of his, I was really fighting back the tears. And I say, boy, what a tremendous gift this man and his music was to not only the trumpet world, but really the world that loved Mahler and loved that symphony.
Right.
So that's that one. My parents don't really know anything about classical music, but I remember once playing that. I'd gotten the recording and happened to play. My father was sitting there reading the newspaper, whatever, and even he, who rarely ever listened to the stuff with me, he said, "Esa es la música de Semana Santa que me gusta tanto." And he said, that's the music that I would listen to during Holy Week,
Oh.
And so it affected him on that level. So that's the one with all the ones that I mentioned, but the one you want to save to the very end is that chorale from the Third Symphony.
Right. And that's a beautiful recording too, with Johnny Ware playing the post-horn solo on that.
Yes, it's legendary.
Yeah.
Legendary.
Yeah. And you also were with Mel Broyles a little bit in that Juilliard.
Yeah. Okay, so Bacchiano had this kind of little plan where he was able to take on a greater student load, because he shared the students with Mel for like for a year. I think it was like a total of 30 lessons each. And Bacchiano was eager to get me to study with Mel, because he felt like, he says, I think Mel, basically what he told me was, I think Mel can get through to you with all the transposition stuff. And God bless him, he absolutely did. Mel had a way of, he kind of knew, like any great comedian or storyteller, you got to know your crowd, you got to know your audience.
Right.
Mel met me and in 5 minutes sized me up, knew exactly what I needed, and spoke to me in a certain way, so that all of a sudden the lights just went on. And so my lessons with Bacchiano took off, because we alternated every other week. One lesson with Bacchiano, one lesson with Broyles. That was a fantastic education. Talk about putting more arrows in the quiver. Damn, because they were very different teachers. My lessons with Bacchiano were in his studio at Juilliard. My lessons with Mel were at the Met, in like the sub basement, in a hallway with ringing reverb. I mean, it just absolutely, it was like being in an echo chamber. But there was method to his madness. People thought he was nuts for doing that. But no, he once told me, he says, I do want the student to have an inflated idea of what their sound is, because they're going to carry that sound with them in their head. And when they go someplace, they are going to, the good ones will recreate that sound in their head and that warmth and all that stuff. So I thank Mel 1,000 times
Yeah.
for helping me during that first year. So I studied with him my sophomore year and my senior year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had good teachers.
And such a colorful personality. Everybody who studied with him has Mel stories of some sort. And he was a larger than life personality. And I loved that about him. I really did. It spoke to me. It worked for me. Maybe for some others it didn't. For me, it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's hear a Mel story.
Well, goodness. I remember him playing. He's the one who kind of reintroduced me to the piccolo trumpet, because I had to give that horn that I auditioned with back to Jack Laumer.
Right.
And then so it looked like the piccolo trumpet was kind of a thing that I'd been needing. So in my junior year, I went and I got one, and he would every once in a while go into his case and he would pull out his instrument. And I remember him playing the Badinerie from the Bach second suite, and he had a recording of Maurice Andre, who had recently recorded it, and he played right along with it. And what this isn't so much of a story, but just more kind of about Mel, and his whole idea was like, okay, this guy is great, but we can do this. We can do this. Use this as an example and learn to play from this. And don't just sit back and ooh and ah. Get into it. Go ahead and get in and play. And he would play the thing with such a ferocity that it's not the way that I would choose to play a Bach by it. But once again, it was very inspiring.
Right.
He would inspire with the way that he played. So no, our lessons were serious. So nothing really ever went on. I would suppose that guys like Jim Ross and Bob Cyranek and Mark Gould are the ones who really have all the real Mel stories. Bob Cyranek has some amazing stories, actually. So those are the guys that you want to talk to.
Well, it's funny. There were a couple of people who were watching. I should mention our friend David Chapman that I play with sometimes down here, that played with you guys for many years. Rodney Marsalis was watching. Jim Ross was watching. So that made me jar my memory. Anybody else, I'm sorry if I left out, but I knew that they would be pertinent to your story. So we talked about the New York school a bit, but now you're talking about when you're in Seattle and you get introduced to the Chicago side of things. First of all, could you kind of compare?
Okay. Yeah. The reason that I became even remotely interested in the Chicago school was because let's say there's Chicago school and then kind of the ed side of that, which would be Vince Chikowitz. So as I started to listen to the Chicago Symphony recordings, I noticed that there just wasn't the kind of impromptu quirkiness that was present on a lot of Philharmonic recordings. I mean, they were impressive recordings, but Chicago Symphony, if something was going to be okay, let me give you an example. The Verdi Requiem that they did, I think it was with Schulte, when they come with the family, that to me was just absolutely startling, the kind of ensemble. When I first heard the Morton Gould conducting the Charles Ives Variations on America, and it's sounding like one trumpet all the way through, me not even realizing that there were two trumpets playing until somebody says, no, that's Vince Chikowitz taking over there. And I went, holy smokes.
You know who that actually is playing second trumpet?
Oh, who is it?
It's Will Scarlett.
That was Will. What
Because
happened to Vince?
because Will told me in a lesson that Vince got sick and Will showed up to work and he had to play that part.
God Almighty. Well, God bless Will. I mean,
I
you see,
assume that's the same recording. I assumed it. I mean, I know they did it
Yeah.
once with Gould, but
there's only one. It's the one with the Ives First Symphony.
yeah, and
on it.
I'm sure. I think Gould, he was talking about the recording date when he
Yeah.
told me the story.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, got it. Well, fabulous. Well, but then again, that sort of tells the story even more, doesn't it?
right. Yeah.
You know, this whole idea. I mean, and guys like that were the reason that I loved section playing so much.
Mhm.
You know, because of Nat Prager
Mm-hmm.
and because of Vince and because of guys like Will, things like that. This is why I have such incredible respect for the great section players, because without them, you know, you get a guy playing a lot of high stuff, but you don't get the meat.
Right.
You got to have the meat, you know.
Yep.
So that's the first thing that I started to notice, that, you know, the little quirkinesses of intonation thing, or maybe, you know, the ragged ensemble things that they would let go in you know, with on the Columbia recordings and all that stuff. They just weren't present there, and so that kind of makes you straighten up and say, wow, that you got to pay attention to that stuff. And it was kind of an education. I always considered my 4 years in Seattle to be kind of a postgraduate degree,
Right.
a 4-year postgraduate program that I was. I mean, in many ways it was, Mark, because remember when I was in Seattle, I played with the symphony, the opera, and the ballet. It was all one. Well, they called it dance because they didn't want the initials to be SOB. So it's Seattle Symphony Opera and Dance. Leave that for her to let that be the way it is. But so I learned, you know, a tremendous amount there, and there was a lot of imitation. And my friend Jeff said, man, listen to this. So we have to try and sound like this. And I said, yeah, you're right. We do. We have to try and make this kind of stuff happen.
Yeah.
So listening to the incredible attention that the CSO guys put into everything they did, you know, that really leaves an effect on you.
Yeah.
With Bacchiano and the Philharmonic, you know, from Metropolis to Bernstein and all that stuff, you felt like every recording was recorded live. That's how you felt. Like it had that kind of ambience to it. So that's its own sort of excitement. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I would say that the differences in the two is learning to pay attention to all of these little things, which is ironic because what Bacchiano taught us to do was pay attention to the little things.
Right.
So, you know, they all manifest themselves in different ways.
So and then you started taking lessons with those guys while you were in Seattle, is that right?
Lessons with the
with
yeah,
Bud
yeah.
and Vince and Jake, right?
Yeah, this is what I was going to say. My interest in the whole Chicago and Chikowitz thing was because of Ed Carroll and Sue Anger. When Ed came as a graduate student to Juilliard, and I listened to him play the times that he would, with this marvelous, pristine quality, very expressive and nice. I said, wow. And then the attacks were taught different in Chicago than they were in New York with Bacchiano. It was a thuddier, old style German kind of approach to playing. If you ever listen to the Boulez recording of Petrushka, that's a perfect example of it, of this kind of attack that he has. But you really had to experience it live, I think, to read. But when I heard Ed play, there was this beautiful, pristine quality to what was going on. It interested me. And then I met Susan, and I'm going, holy smokes, what are they putting in the water in Chicago? That made me want to go then. Shortly before the audition for the when Rolf Smedvig left Boston, and that was open, I wanted to like really work out. So I did my own week-long seminar where I took 2 lessons from Bud, 2 from Vince, and 1 from Arnold Jacobs. Now, the lesson with Bud was wonderful because it was like studying with Vacchiano.
Right.
He focused on exactly the same sorts of things, the musical qualities, and by inference, the rules. He said, no, you want to make sure and phrase it like this, like that. Great. Vince helped me because I said to him, he said, what is it with your students? with this wonderful pop to the articulation. So, oh, well, I have to work on this and all that. And so I took a couple lessons with him. And then I took one with Arnold. And I will just admit straight up, as the kids say, I don't want to lie. A lot of it just went over my head because at that time I wasn't dealing with any kind of that I knew that I understood any kind of problems, So I understood just, okay, take a big breath and all this stuff. But the things he was trying to show me, it did go over my head. Okay. But everything else I was able to take into the audition with for Boston. Or had I already? No, God, I'm already losing when I did a lot of these things. But oh no, I was getting ready for that first audition at Boston, and sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought. So many things that I'm thinking about that happened at once. I brought everything together, worked on it. I literally practiced about anywhere from 4 to 5 hours a day for that entire week, and then came back to Seattle and was playing differently. Went and took the audition for Boston, and made the finals, made the semifinals. There were 10 of us in there. Got into the final cut. There were 5 of us, and then at the very end, there was 1 of us. That was me. However, Ozawa was not convinced, so he said, "Let's get some more players in here, have them play with the orchestra." And so that's known as the time that Charlie Schluter got the job and I didn't. This is life. And when that opening occurred, I didn't take the audition because I said, I really love Seattle. I love my friends here. I mean, they've become like my family here. And they had a round of auditions at Minnesota and didn't pick anybody. And that's when, I guess it must have been Charlie's idea. He probably said, well, what we did in Boston, what they did in Boston really worked out well for him. We got 5 players and played with the orchestra and all this stuff. And maybe we should do the same. So I got called in with, they called me, and at first I said no. And then they called me back and they said, look, we'll pay your way out. We'll put you up. And I said, okay, now you're talking. So they had me, Wilmer Wise, wonderful Wilmer Wise. And for people who don't know that name, it's that, as Bernstein put it himself, the genius first trumpet player playing on the West Side Story.
The opera recording. Yeah.
Yes, the opera recording, right, with Carreras and all those people. So Wilmer was one of them. A gentleman, John Ailey, certainly from the University of Wisconsin, was one of them. Larry Weeks, God rest his soul, he was playing in Toronto, and he got called in to do it. And then one of my dearest friends for life, John Rochella. John and I met at this thing, and we really hit it off. We the night before the audition, we went out and got an Italian meal, and we just became the best of friends, and we've stayed good friends all of these years. And so the day that I got in, I think I got in the early afternoon. I had to go in and play with the brass section. All of us did. We all did the same thing.
Yeah.
But I went and played with the brass section, La Péri and Mahler Third Chorale, and things like that, ensemble things, Daft Chloe. And then the next day, I played the usual 20 minutes worth of excerpts, as did the other guys. So it was like one candidate after the other playing with the orchestra, which is, in my opinion, that's the way to do it. I've seen where they say, okay, you come and play this week, you come and play this week. What if we had a flute player once who got to play Daphnis and Chloe, and then another flute player who played Bruckner 5. Now, okay, the parts, but I mean, I think those are two fairly different pieces. So I think the idea of just having them come in, find a day, and then have them play one after the other, I think that's the easiest. And then after that, then I have to play a regular stand-up audition, and it was at that point that the personnel manager did the other. That's a Laureano.
A stand-up audition? Did you have to tell dad joke? A stand-up audition?
Yes.
Did you have to tell jokes at that audition?
If that had been the case, well, there would have been no question.
Exactly. That's right. Well, Chuck Willard commented, ask Manny about the Minnesota Orchestra audition and the newspaper with Wilmer Wise.
Oh, leave it to Chuck. Chuck Willard is a very, very dear friend that I've made in the last decade, who lived in Detroit. Now he's down in the Fort Worth area. But when you're a young man, you don't always think about things. So they put us all up at the Curtis Hotel, which is just a few blocks away from the hall. So right around breakfast, we all kind of wound up at the same table, having breakfast and just kind of shooting the breeze. And so I found a paper, one of these like Sunday papers. And so we're eating like this, and then I'm looking through it, and I go to the real estate section. Now, we had just put money down on, we put earnest money down on a house. So I am innocently just looking at the real estate because I was interested in real estate prices. I was comparing them to Seattle. So Larry Weeks, in his very Philly way, says, so what are you looking at over there? And I said, well, I'm just looking at the real estate prices here. At which point, everybody at the table freezes and looks at me like this. And Larry says, it's a little early to be looking at that, don't you think? I just took the paper, just put it down like this, and kept eating my eggs. I didn't mean anything by it, but it was just one of those dumb things that you do. So yeah, well, a little early to be looking at that, ain't it? Yeah.
But it worked out. It worked out.
It worked out. It worked out. It worked out. God has always been good to me. So yes, it worked out.
And so, we were before we came on, we were talking about, the sections you've had. And I know that the first time you and I met, we were talking about sections, and you were telling me how you were young when you were in those roles, and you had the older guys that were so supportive.
Yes. In Seattle. Yeah. But both, as I said, Rick and Jeff were just great to me. And then when I moved, when I got the job here, I had a wonderful second trumpet player named Clement Volpe, who just turned 90 just like a couple of years ago. The assistant principal is Ron Hasselman, and the fourth trumpet and utility was a Vacchiano student by the name of Mike Hipps. So Clement was a Louis Davidson student. Ron was a contemporary of Vince's, but he studied with Reynolds Schilke and then with Arnold Jacobs. Okay, and those guys, really did the balancing act of really showing me wonderful respect for the position I had, but then helping me along with certain things. I remember I was embarrassed at one thing. Mike Hips had to tell me, about apportioning parts and all this stuff, and he was absolutely right. And about doing things kind of at the last minute. He taught me that I needed to be more organized about that. I was like 26, so
Yeah.
I had a lot to learn. And then the story that Ron likes to tell is that when he was getting names of people that would, he called up Herseth, asked me, said, "Have you heard anybody?" And he ran a bunch of names by me. He says, "Yeah, it's a good player like this." And he says, "What about Laureano?" And he goes, "Oh, who's that?" And he says, "Oh, this kid out in Seattle, Manny Laureano." He says, "Played for me. It's good player." He goes, "Oh, okay. All right, great. Thanks. I'll check that out." Then he called Vince, and he ran the same names by. He says, "Yeah, good player. He's maybe not so strong, but he's good, beautiful sound. All this." I said, "What about Laureano?" He goes, "With the kid in Seattle," and he goes, "Yeah. You should try and get a hold of him." I said, "All right." And then so he called Jacobs, and he said, "Have you heard anybody come through the studio to come over for lessons?" And he went through names. And he says, "Yeah, well, what about this Laureano kid? Have you called him?" And he's like, going, "Who is this guy? Who is the Laureano guy?" And so that's when I got the phone call to come on out. The other thing that Ron said that again touched me, and is a tribute to Mr. Vacchiano, was some rhythmic stuff. He said, since we got to work with the guys side by side, obviously we're looking for a principal trumpet. And when you played, there was no ambivalence to what you were doing. You just laid it down and it was easy for us to just go. He says, your movements to cue coincided accurately with what you were playing. He said, so it was like we felt instantly comfortable with you doing what you were doing. So that played very much in my favor. So, and now the boys that I have now, I'll go down the list. Please. So we've got Bob Dore, who is like the quintessential second trumpet, steady Eddie, does all the stuff, and God bless him. He, whereas I used to let Clement do like Beethoven, Haydn, Mozart symphonies and displace the octaves, I said, I kind of had a change of heart about the way I want to hear this. He says, I think Beethoven really had a specific sound that he heard when he was able to hear, that he imagined. And if you would, Bob, please play these things, which made his job much harder. But God bless him. He would go at it, and that's what you want in a second trumpet player, somebody who's very cooperative like that. So people used to ask Clement Volpe, the old second trumpet player, what's the secret of playing second trumpet? And he says, get along with the first trumpet player, which I've always appreciated. And Bob and I are great friends. Then Doug Carlson he's my Johnny Ware. Right. Beautiful sound, but always with the beautiful expressive tone and always listening for matching and for all this stuff. Very receptive always. If I have a suggestion about what, how I want something to sound that we're doing. And then there's Chuck Lazarus. Chuck Lazarus has completely redefined the whole fourth trumpet thing. First of all, the guy and I were very good friends.
Yeah.
And Chuck is what I call a story mag. He's one of these guys that if something is going to happen at home or on tour, it's gonna happen to Chuck, and he will have the best way of relaying it as a story. And I mean, we have hung out on tours and just made each other crack up until the wee hours of the morning with much French grape juice involved.
Yes, we.
But he's a marvelous player who is so at home in so many different styles. So in the best sense of the word, he is a true utility player.
Mhm.
You know, so and it's nice having the array of talent, dispositions and such. But they're all princes, all great. We can all talk every so often. We get a chance to Zoom, and Chuck will always regale us with the most interesting backgrounds on his Zoom calls.
Well, you're a little bit of a practical joker with Chuck, haven't you been in the past?
God, yes.
There is some Heldenleben story. I feel like you remember
Yes.
telling me at some point.
Yes. So Chuck had this habit. Notice I say had this habit at first of making these little bets about things, whether it would be something in the orchestra or something outside the orchestra. And most of the time, I would win these bets just because I'm older and I know more.
Yeah.
But this one time, we have across the plaza from the hall a Caribou Coffee, and he said, and we were playing on Heldenleben, and so he says, you know, I bet you that between the time you get up and walk off stage, I bet you couldn't go over to Caribou and get an espresso and come back in time to play the call. And without even thinking, I said, you're on. And not only that, I'm going to do it on Friday night during the broadcast. So we get the da 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 da. So the three of us walk off stage. Now, one of the guys was an extra player, a gentleman named Sylvain Pinault, who's from Montreal. And he was playing the third part. So it was me, Chuck, and Sylvain. And so I walk off, grab my jacket, which is preset, go up and I put my horn down and I said, okay, I'll see you. And it's like the whole thing goes on and Chuck's like listening and saying, damn, he's not back yet. Man. And if he doesn't make it back, how are we gonna play this like this? And about a minute before I had to play, I walk in, take off my coat, and hand the coffee to him because the bet was if I do it, you have to slam those two servings of espresso. And so I walked in, handed it to him. He slams it. I take off the jacket. And so we go on. We play the show. I can't believe you did it. I can't believe you did it. At about 11:30 that night, I get a phone call. You so and so and so and so. I know what you did. Well, his soon-to-be fiance had been working in the offices right down the hallway where I would have had to run and had a full view of all this. And she said, he never went to Caribou. And so what I had done before the show, I gone to Caribou, gotten the coffee and put it in the refrigerator. And then when Heldenleben started, I put it in the microwave, got it nice and just like boiling hot, knowing that it would eventually get down to a reasonable temperature by the time in 20 minutes. And so when I walked off, I had taken that coffee and preset it in the personnel manager's office. I went inside the personnel manager's office, turned down the radio so that I could hear the concert going on. When I saw about 2 minutes left, turned it on, put my jacket back on, went like this, walked in, handed the coffee to Chuck. without ever having to go outside the building. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff we like to do to Chuck.
That's well, yeah, like we were saying before, it's just so rare to have a section that gets along as well as you guys do, and and you can hear it, of course, on the recordings you can hear it, or if you see the orchestra. But I remember the a Facebook picture you put with you and Bob playing chess. This is black and white thing. It's like says heaven. I'm like, wait, did something happen? But
actually, that's a live shot. That's
right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your equipment and how that evolved over time, because Dave Monette's very close to you and very important to your career. And how did you go from point A to point B with that?
So I had played the Bach for my goodness, up to about into 1984.
What chapter?
And then I'm sorry.
What chapter?
What chapter?
You said in 1984.
Oh,
the year. Sorry, it was a horrible pun.
Not quite the final act. Not quite the final act. And in the summer, I had become acquainted with this fellow that was making these expensive trumpets, and I went, my God, what who's this guy think he is? Making trumpets like this. And I'd heard Charlie was playing. I said, wow, really? And Dave has a sister who at that time was living in Minnesota. She was getting a degree there. And so he came to visit, and he looked me up, and he said, I'm Dave. I made horns for Charlie and Winton and Herseth and all. Would you like to get together and try one? I said, sure, why not? And so he had, I think, some B flats with him. And so I met him first at his sister's house, and just my nature in general, if I'm at somebody's house and I'm playing a trumpet, I tend to not play it full bore. I kind of take it easy. It's just from growing up in the projects. My father used to get mad at me if I played loud. So I've spent the last 50 years getting back at him, I guess. So I was kind of playing quietly, and Dave said, well, he says, okay. He says, you clearly don't have the same sort of expanse to your sound that Bud and Charlie do, but I think I can make you a horn. Which now Dave tells that story, just kind of looking up at the sky, going, "Hey," you're just saying that to me because he found out that it wasn't quite that way.
Right. That's right.
So I took the horn to the hall, played a show, and I went, wow, it was a Summer Pops. I said, this is gorgeous. The intonation is good, and it's solid as hell. Make me one. Go ahead, man, make one. So he said, well, let me. I'd like to make a C trumpet version of this. I said, great. So we stay in contact, and he says, okay, I'm going to send you a horn, and we are playing also Sprach Zarathustra with Maestro Skrbachevsky. And we had already played the typical opening night Wednesday. And Thursday morning, here's this package. And there it is. And so I said, oh, wow. So, like I say, also Sprach Zarathustra. And so I'm playing it, and I go for the high C. It's like I can't miss it. Even trying to miss it, I just couldn't miss it. I went, holy smokes. So I took the new horn and tried it out that night. Thursday night, we were playing in St. Paul. And then Friday night, we played it as a broadcast. And I've stayed with it ever since. I said, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. The wonderful thing about the relationship that I've had with Dave is that it's transcended just the horn making, but wonderful chats, just kind of philosophically about people, about the human body, how it responds, about resonance, about how it affects his work, things like that. So I've known Dave since 1984. Goodness me. Yeah, so it's 37 years now. Isn't that insane?
Long time.
And have seen the various evolutions of his horns from what he made in Chicago to going with the heavier instruments and going back. Oh, and this, you'll love this. So I was playing the Raja Samadhi, bigger, much bigger instrument, and nobody else in the section was playing a large instrument like that. So I said, Dave, I think it's just a question of me, not. I know that they're not going to have these instruments, and I never ever asked them to. When Clement got his Chicago Monet, he did that completely of his own volition.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I'm going. If you've got something smaller, I said, let me go with that. And that's when he had come out with the 900 series. So Ado de Wart was conducting. Guess what piece we were doing that week?
I'm going to guess Alpine Symphony.
No, also Sprach Zarathustra.
Oh, okay.
So I had played the Wednesday night, and here we were. It was Thursday morning, and I had gotten this horn delivered to the hall. And I'll never forget that when I went to play the call in the Strauss, normally conductors, when somebody has a big solo like that, they'll just like give them a little look, and that usually they won't continue looking at them. But when he looked, he kind of went, he did a double take, kind of went like, wait a minute, that's a different instrument. So I really enjoyed playing that call that particular day, just to see that. I was happy that he actually noticed. So so anyway, so I've kind of seen the various incarnations, and the horn that I play now, this little the XLT. Oh my God, that's like driving a sports car. It's really nice. But I mean, in an ergonomic sense, it just fits me. It just fits me. And so I said, Dave, this is the horn I'm going to die on. So it really is really, really nice.
Yeah. And there's so many great recordings with you guys. I mean, I think a lot of people think of the Alpine Symphony, but there's so many Mahler recordings out right now on iTunes that fantastic.
Yeah, I thank you. That's nice of you to say, and I appreciate that. This one that we just released, this Mahler 10, I have to say, if people want to hear me on that, well, look, pretty much all the Mahler recordings that I did have been on this, on the XLT. But when you have a project that's as big as this Mahler, you tend to grow a little bit. You just kind of mature with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I really love that recording.
Yeah,
I really do love that recording. There are some things that you know how it is when you've recorded something and you hear it and it's like, it's not the take I would have used, or it's not, doesn't come off the way I thought it was. And this one, everything comes off the way I felt it and remembered, and that's a nice feeling.
Yeah,
So you're kind of at the mercy of the
engineers a little bit.
The engineers and all that, but we've got some kick butt engineers, Rob Suff and his guys over at Beast Recordings.
Yeah,
that is one guy. When Rob comes over the intercom and he says, "This is sharp, this is too loud, this is that," there's no arguing. Not because he's this totalitarian. No, it's just because you have so much respect for his ear. If he hears it that way, then that's because it's that way, and you need to adjust and do that. And we've learned to kind of play for him. We know what he's going to like and what he's not going to like. And it's not just about the recording; it's also obviously about the guy with the stick. When we've gotten to to know him over the last 18 years
Yeah.
or so. So we know what he likes. So it's a good relationship, with the Sibelius, the Beethoven recordings. Those were all on rotary trumpet, the Tchaikovsky piano concertos. This has been a wonderful experience. We have 3 left. We have 8, 9, and 3 that we have to do. And I would like to be around to do it, but we have to uncovid ourselves to make these recordings.
I was going to ask you 2 questions about practicing, because I was going to say, what's your practicing been like in normal times? And what's your daily routine and things you do? And then what's your practice like in COVID times?
Yeah. So I would say that my practicing for COVID has taken on a very different character. First of all, I have gone into my library of books and taken out stuff that I haven't looked at for years. And when you're on this kind of maintenance schedule of preparing orchestral parts and keeping your chops up, you've got kind of your little favorite things that you like to do. I mean, I'm done usually and ready to start warming up by about 8 o'clock, 8:15 at the very latest.
Right.
And I don't like to call my warming up. I use it because it's just easier to say. But as far as I'm concerned, it's practice immediately. It's I don't think of warming my sound up. It does happen kind of that way, but conceptually, it's practicing. Maybe I'm practicing a little slower, but fine. Then I pay attention to the articulation and things like that. So if we've had to extract lemonade from the lemons that COVID has given us, it has been the opportunity to reacquaint myself with things that I haven't looked at for a while. I've been pulling out books and seeing some of Vacchiano's old markings on these, and you start to yeah, that's right. Thinking about some of the things with breathing. So I've been thinking a lot about Arnold Jacobs lately, and some of the conversations that we had about breathing. Also, Vince, I've been really thinking about all my teachers, from Jimmy Smith to Rob Roy McGregor to Mr. Vacchiano and Mel Broyles, and I consider Bud to be a teacher of mine. Those 2 lessons were very, very big for me, very impressive. And also, Vince was somebody that after those lessons that I had, I went back to him and Jacobs, because if I had something that I was playing, I wanted to play it for him. I said, "What do you think? What would you?" And he'd give me his impressions about it. And I would have pedagogical lessons with Jacobs. I say, "So I have a student that has this issue. How do you approach it?" I mean, good Lord, what a gift that is. And then I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like one of those corny things that people say when you ask them, but I'm going to tell you the honest truth. Mm-hmm. My teachers are just about all the trumpet players that I come into contact with, because as I did when I was young, I listen. I really pay attention to what people say. And an offhanded casual comment, I'll take it home and I'll say, let me try this. I feel, look, the martial arts thing for me has been big because it's a method of growth. It's learning something for which I have very little talent, that I've had to really get it together and do things that I never really thought I'd be able to do. How Bud loved golf.
Yep.
And there are things you associate when you get to know any of these trumpet players. You learn little things that they like to do, and a lot of people know about Bud and golf. And I think that I'm attracted to the martial arts for the same reason that Steve Hendrickson's another guy. He's another guy who loves to play golf. I'm attracted to the martial arts for the same reason that a lot of people love golf. There is a quality to it that is like trumpet playing. There's a cerebral aspect to it And then there's just the pick up the freaking club and do it aspect of it.
Right.
And trumpet is so much the same. In trumpet and martial arts, flexibility. In trumpet and martial arts, repetition, memorization, fundamentals, the importance of fundamentals. The katas that we do, these pre-designed set of movements against an imaginary opponent, those are our little solos. Those are our Haydns and Hummels.
Yeah.
Sparring night for me, which is Wednesday night, which is my favorite night of the entire week, is jazz. That's improvisation, reacting, playing duets against with an opponent and reacting to what he or she does. So it's like martial arts and trumpet playing have just taken this wonderful parallel path for me that remind me that in trumpet, I need to continue growing, that to stand still is not enough. So that's part of the lemonade that I've extracted from this year-long lemon that we've been dealing with.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And that's why I'm so grateful that you came on, because I think a lot of people are hearing things you're saying and learning from that, and hopefully they'll take some of it in.
Yeah.
You know, and so what's your morning routine? What's your first practice session?
Oh, for me, I like vacillating between two things. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel like long tones, sometimes you feel like moving the fingers right away.
Right.
I think of the long tones and how important though that was to like the stuff that I learned with Chikowitz, and then you turn around and Herbert L. Clark, who said, "No, don't play long tones. Play long phrases while you're moving the fingers." Oh, you know what I'm into lately is how everybody prepares for auditions. Let's say it's a second trumpet gig, and what do they have to play? They have to play the low stuff from Mein Heldenleben, and they have to play Carmen. Well, that involves kicking out the third slide and doing all of that stuff. Well, I have basically incorporated F major into my scale work every day. And I've also incorporated it into instead of if I'm not in the mood to play if I'm not in the mood to play that, then I'll play and I'll do it chromatically, and I'll do it in every key. I'll play if I want to play, instead of playing the Chikowitz, the VC1, da, 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 I'll play Yellowbird. Da, 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 dee, da, 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 dee, da, da, da. Doing that kind of thing.
Which, by the way, if anybody's watching, the book you just mentioned, you can get at Studio 259 Productions. And if you have been trying to order one, we fixed the problem we had the other day. So there it is.
Good. Good. That's wonderful. I think of Vince every time I pick that up. I don't just pick up the book. I kind of pick him up a little bit. We had a nice relationship,
What were you working on in lessons with him? Kind of going back to that period a little bit. What were those like? What was he focused on?
Mostly articulation and note connection. Every once in a while, you see all these things that we just sort of take for granted. Sometimes you don't realize that you're not doing it as much as you might think you are, and you need that external set of ears. And so that's why I would go to Vince. It's just like, I need you to listen to this and just see if you think that I'm going all the way. So that primarily, that's what it was. It was never for like upper register or flexibility, anything like that. It was mostly just making sure that sounds were starting in a consistent way, and that my sound was flowing from note to note, whether it was slurred or articulated.
Right.
That was for me, that was the biggest gift that I got. from working with Vince. So back to your original question.
Yep.
So I'll do a few little things like that, and either Goldman or Arbin, either the pa 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 pi da pa pa pi da pa pa pi da pa pa pa, and try and play it melodically and musically, not mechanically.
Right.
You know, or in the Arbin book, pa 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 pi pi pa 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 pi pa 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 pi pa pa, just trying to think, looking for that consistency. Then I think about Jacobs, and I make sure that I get that what I'm going in. So, you know, it's like every time I sit down, I think I go through every teacher that I've ever worked with,
Yeah.
and think about them. So my practice routine, let us say that it's steady, but it's not always the same material. There are some things that I do like to play. Oh, one thing that I do in the Arbin, for example, I'll set the metronome at 90. And then I'll do the next one and I'll set it to 91. And I'll do the next one, 92, and just kind of get going like that. And I like to leave for the hall being able to do the single tongue anywhere between 100 and 116, something like that. There are folks that play faster, folks that don't play as fast, you know, and then that little rest, that car ride to the hall, you know, lets my chops recover, and I feel really good to just play a little bit of the C trumpet. That's another thing, by the way. I play. I usually start my little morning routine with the B flat, and then I'll play the C trumpet at the hall.
Yeah.
If I were to play C trumpet, let's see, I haven't played a concert with them for over 2 weeks, and I've been playing almost B flat exclusively. I need to get the C trumpet out a day or two before.
Yeah,
that's just me. I need to kind of get in touch with that, the different response, the different timbre, all that sort of thing. I like to, because I have already noticed that if I do a week of B flat and then just sit down and the C trumpets, this is like the first time I've played it. It's wonky until I get my brain turned on, you know, because everything is so different.
Yeah, that's great information. I think a lot of people feel about going B flat to C and keeping things in check. I actually had a thought about this earlier. You were talking about the different articulation in the different cities at that point. New York really was a B flat town in many ways, right?
Right. Exactly. This is the thing that people would say. It says, don't forget the B flat. You know, it's important to play it, and I really agree with that. You know what Vacchiano said to me about Tchaik 4? No. He said this was already after I'd gone pro already, and I just came back to New York, and taking a lesson with him was just an excuse to see him, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and he says, yeah, you know, if you ever play that Tchaikovsky fourth, he says, play it on a B flat once in a while. He says, it's good to have that fear. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. You know, that opening, you know, sit there on 2 and 3. Yeah, okay, it's good. And if you're not careful, you know, you can wind up clipping something just because you're just a little too comfortable with it. You know, it's like being on a date and saying the wrong thing because you're taking too much for granted. No, you've got to you've got to have a little bit of respect, you know. So so I did that with our wonderful assistant conductor who we used to have here, Roderick Cox. He was going to play Tchaikovsky fourth. And I said, Roderick, what do you think if I play on the B flat, Russian style?
Yeah.
He's an old horn player, and he said, do you really want to do that? I said, yeah, man. I said I'd really love to. And Lynn Erickson was playing. This was when Doug was out in San Francisco, and
Right.
Lynn was playing. So Lynn, God bless her, Lynn plays with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and she came to us for a year, and God bless her. She said, "All right, we'll go for it. We'll do it." And so she and I played that week, or whatever that set of, oh, it was a week, yeah. Um, that set of performances on the B flat, and it does well for one to remember to respect the possibilities on this. The other thing that I did, let me see, was for Andrew Litton. Andrew Litton was in for the summer, and we were going to do Brahms 4. And I said, Andy, they said, would you be okay if I played this on the B flat rotaries instead of the C's? And that's wicked. That puts you into that crack zone all the way through. But again, it's just something to work on. We, as trumpet players, I think, need to take any opportunity that we can to feel like we're continuing to grow, that we're able to revisit doing certain things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, speaking of certain things, I was thinking we were wearing these black shirts, but when did your hand have a glove on it that turns you into a conductor, like Darth Vader? When did that?
That happened in ninth grade. I went to the dark side in ninth grade. It was a day when the teachers and students got to reverse roles. Some smart kid would get to teach the math class or the social studies or whatever. And so I asked Mr. Vetter, the band director, I said, can I conduct the band on switch day? And he said, yeah, sure. And
yeah, it was
impossible. So
that's a great Star Wars reference.
Oh, absolutely.
Great.
And so the glove grew from there.
Yep.
And when I was in high school, there was a conducting class that was offered, and so I learned actual technique and stuff. And then I got to conduct an orchestra, first movement of Beethoven, First Symphony. Yeah. And so learned that piece. And then when I was at Juilliard, I put it down really. I didn't really, I did tiny little bits here and there. And when I was in Seattle, I did, again, little tiny bits. I conducted a performance of L'Histoire. And when I got here to Minnesota, there was a community band back in like 1983 or something like that needed a music director. And so I said, it'd be really fun. And I did that. I had an opportunity to conduct the orchestra in a young person's concert. People hear things and they get to see you do stuff and all that. And one of the most enjoyable things that I got to do was conduct Doc.
I was going to ask you about this.
Yes, he was. It was like the program was called All in the Family. So I played the Hummel Concerto, the last movement of the Hummel Concerto, and then he played Napoli. And so, no, not Napoli. Largo Factotum from Barbara Seville. Mm-hmm. And so I conducted the orchestra doing that. And then the Youth Symphony came along, the opportunity to work with young people. And then at that time, the Metropolitan Symphony. And then now, most recently, the only orchestra that I have now is the Bloomington Symphony. But I've had opportunity to go conduct at Eastern Music Festival, at Indiana, where we got our shirts, things like that. Yes. So it's something that I think it's always been present in my life. Sometimes who are now with, again, the year of COVID, that's gone completely back. I haven't conducted anything other than student groups at my wife's school. But I'm looking forward to getting up in front of my beloved Bloomington Symphony and getting a chance to work with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully not too long.
No, hopefully maybe the end of the summer would be nice.
It'd be nice.
Yes.
It'd be nice. Well, Manny, this has been amazing. I mean, yeah, I know I've had you on here for 2.5 hours, but it's awesome always to talk to you, and I'm always happy to see you. And it's so many stories, and just hang in there till after I sign off, and we'll chat for just a second.
Sure,
and,
sure. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for what you do with these interviews. My goodness, I mean to just give people the opportunity to get up close and personal with the public about just stuff that folks might not have considered, might not know about them. This is a wonderful service that you're providing. So,
well, thank you
for doing that. Honestly,
I appreciate that very much, and it's been fun, and there's so many brass players. There's no end in sight.
Yeah, I know. I don't think that'll be ending anytime soon. So,
I haven't had a euphonium player on yet, but that doesn't mean I'm going to.
Well, all right then. I'll let you deal with the ramifications of that.
Thank you so much, Manny. And thanks for everybody who watched.
Hey, listen, just before we go, I want to do just a very, very brief recognition of, I have the blessed honor of being a Hispanic trumpet player in a wonderful position like this. But I want to recognize people that came before me in Adel Sanchez in DC, and the wonderful work that he did there. In Phoenix, Manny Araujo as well. And now, God forgive me, I didn't know that we had a Hispanic trumpet player as principal trumpet of the freaking Chicago Symphony, this guy Batayan. And I heard him play it, and I'm just like going, yeah! It was really, it was wonderful to see that, from guys like Manny and Adele, who kind of represent one generation, myself, who's still hanging on, and then Batayan, who's moving forward with a great orchestra. And music it's for everybody. Classical music is for everybody.
And Speziali too, because her folks were from Cuba.
Yes, of course, Marie. Yeah. She's we've talked on the phone, and we've talked on Zoom, I think, with you, but I've never gotten a chance to go walk up and give that woman a hug.
Oh,
but
she gives those out a lot.
Yeah, good. So, yeah. So, it's a wonderful thing to see. We are a big universe, we trumpet players, and the more we share with each other, the more we learn from each other.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Manny. It's great. And
all right.
I'll see the rest of you guys later. Take care.